What if the key to healing your health struggles isn't just in what you eat or how you move, but in understanding your DNA? In today's episode, we explore the powerful intersection of genetics, trauma, and nervous system regulation with clinical nutritionist and naturopath Sheridan Genrich. Sheridan's personal health journey began with a terrifying experience in China, an event that left a deep emotional and psychological scars. Since then, she's combined lived experience with cutting-edge DNA science to help others heal from the inside out. This conversation is essential for anyone who feels stuck, chronically exhausted, overwhelmed, and wonders if there's something deeper going on. Perhaps the answer is written in your DNA. Welcome, Sheridan, all the way from New York City. It's great to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me, Shelley.
This is going to be a really exciting chat because I love the fact it's not just coming from a research or science background, it's coming from lived experience. Can you take us back to the incident in China, how that changed everything for you, and I guess how it has shaped your health journey?
Yeah, so I was studying already and interested in natural health when I was a flight attendant. And the night that I landed in China, that was very different to every other experience I'd been into with trips with work into China, was when I was taken away from the rest of the crew on the plane. I was singled out, actually met at the aircraft door, and I knew, being in a communist country, that my freedom was not going to be the same. And really the most daunting part was actually being singled out from the rest of the colleagues that I'd been working with for like 8 years at that time, and just feeling not supported at all. Mm-hmm. And it was something, as a Westerner, I just couldn't imagine. I knew a lot about some of the terrible human rights abuse in China, but I just, as a Westerner, felt like it was a bit removed from me. And I'd been practicing a meditation practice, spiritual practice that in China was not accepted. It was actually persecuted very severely. So I knew when they were taking me aside that I had been watched and that it was not some random accident. And that did make me very nervous, but it was also the fact that I was left on my own in a room with some very harsh Chinese officials who were, like just abusing me. And it just wouldn't happen in another country. You'd have other people supporting you. And so while I had really strong faith, my nervous system went into shock. Mm-hmm. And the type of person I am, I internalized that. And it was something that I had never really embodied to that extent until that night. And I got through. I like, to put a long story short, they were after my spiritual book, and they asked about it. They searched on my bags, and when they found my book, which teaches me truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance, I took it everywhere with me. And I'd taken it into China before on other work trips. It's a practice of Falun Gong, which was something I had benefited from for like at least 8 years prior to that. So that was the turning point. And after they found the book, I was again left just with abuse being hurled at me verbally, and just feeling like what on earth was going to happen, because I didn't feel like any lawyers were going to come and try and hear my side of the story. A couple of hours went by, and then I was actually sent back to Australia. But on the way down to the aircraft again, they were still saying terrible things to me, and even in front of passengers on the way back home. And I was still in my work uniform. So just that humiliation, and again, my nervous system just kind of not comprehending what was really happening. I got home to Australia, luckily safe back in my own bed that night, but I got a call from my manager saying that I was being stood down, an investigation was happening, and they were going to just like I had done something wrong, and all I had taken off me was my book and some papers. And so I was just like, okay, now I'm in Australia and I'm being, again, feeling like I'm punished. And so I tried to just like let the process go naturally. But in the end, I was terminated. A couple of months of investigation went by that I appealed, but I basically lost my job at that point as a long haul flight attendant. And just never having experienced this degree of stress. I mean, I've been through breakups, I've had family disputes, like a lot of other things that just didn't seem like it was out of a movie, but this really did feel like I was in a movie. And so I shut down, and that was really the core of me not knowing that I was physically okay, but that shutdown and that withdrawal was where I had gone to a new place that I was only not even aware of at the time. So,
Sheridan, a frightening experience for anybody. A woman on her own in China with authorities. Obviously, the interrogation was extremely intense and frightening, and you can say now you're in that fight or flight situation. But this all happened over the sort of the course of maybe 12 hours, probably at the most, was it? From the time you landed in China, went through this experience, and were back on a plane heading home without any real time to process or understand what on earth was going on. Obviously, the case that happened post that with your being let go from your employment, another situation on top of this trauma. But the chances were you were in a trauma state from the minute they opened the plane door that night. That is a prolonged period to be in a fight or flight situation.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Shelley. It's so, in the time, you're not aware of it. It's like time slows down. And I've worked with patients before, but it's different when it's actually in your body that you're having those cellular hormonal changes. And so I guess I disassociated. And that's what I wrote about when I eventually started to uncover that what I'd been through was actually something that I could use as a story to help other people. And that's the start of my book, and how I had actually disassociated in a way to protect myself almost. And so I was unable to feel, and even also to trust being around other people was something that I was, again, unaware that I was doing as a form of survival. And while I had really small, like little bits of interaction around other people, I really became quite isolated on how much I would open up to someone until I started writing the book. So, it was... And I'd been working on the way up to China as well. So it was actually a very, very long day. I've forgotten how many hours. But it was like a 10-hour day before I even landed. And then I had to fly back. It was probably 30 hours. I drove home as well. When I got back into Sydney, I then got in my car and went home, and I was just sort of like, okay, survival mode was in full force.
I can imagine in that job as a long haul flight attendant, your body goes through a lot of sort of daily stress and trauma anyway, with time differences, being on your feet, obviously dealing with the public. So I guess you probably felt like you dealt with everything quite well considering the circumstances. There was a lot that felt quite normal, and yet you'd been through this intense experience. But now, as you say, I have to drive home and I'll unpack it all later. Like I'll deal with all this later. There's some things that, urgently need my attention right now. So suppressing the trauma response, when did you start to realize that this was affecting your health? Was it sort of days or weeks or months down the track?
There was sort of cracks starting to appear after a couple of months. But the most intense part was in my marriage. And that was really where I had, my marriage ended a couple of years after this incident. and it had been building. I was sleeping pretty poorly, waking up a lot at night. But otherwise, I was again like just in my head. So I was in that strong, just keep going, that sense of responsibility. And so on the outside, people probably didn't really notice what was going on, except for the social withdrawal and just unable, I wasn't able to talk about what was going on legally as well. Mm-hmm. So I was silenced, and that isolation wasn't something I dealt with until years later when I actually started writing. So writing was the form of, and initially just to, again, help someone else, was what I started to write the book for, because patients had been asking me. I was in clinical practice by this time, and I wanted to just talk about their stories. But people put me a bit on a pedestal and thought, oh, well, you look fine. You must be okay. You're doing everything like diet perfectly, and you must be exercising enough, and everything you do is just fine. But they didn't realize that socially, I had really suffered, and I was, again, just pushing it down and imploding almost on myself. But writing started to peel that away from me, and actually more people started to relate because I was being vulnerable again. Mm-hmm. And it was something I hadn't been able to do because, I was just, I got trained, I guess, through being in the public role where you have to be on show as a flight attendant, not as much as television work would have been for you, but you have to be able to just perform almost. And so you're forgetting about everything that is going on in your stuff. So writing was really probably the best thing that came out of it. In order to give someone else an opportunity to see the patterns that we go through when we go into these shock states, and it could be in any form, minor, or it's whatever someone's perception is.
Mm-hmm. Imagine this: unlocking your genetic blueprint with insights from over 200 healthy aging genes, pinpointing your unique SNPs and potential red flags, understanding what your body needs to thrive and where it may need some extra support. No more guesswork, no more random supplements, one-off blood tests, or one-size-fits-all advice. For the first time in history, we have access to the power of genetic testing, something no generation before us has had. This information could change everything. Join our free DNA webinar and you'll get our Stay Well scorecard jam-packed with the markers that we want you to track every year, starting now. Friends, know your genes, own your health. Let's learn to thrive together. Visit theagingproject.com to register, and I'll see you there. I think everybody listening to this episode will be saying, perhaps I haven't been detained in a foreign country, but I have experienced these moments of trauma that I know I have suppressed and I have pushed down, or that fight or flight, and just never feeling like I've had a chance to recover from that situation. This is where your incredible book, DNA Powered Healing, has come in, and you've spoken a little bit about that writing process. There must have been a shift for you as a clinical nutritionist and naturopath, is I could do more. There's something I'm missing in my own puzzle. Why did you reach out for a DNA test? What was it that you had come across in your learnings that said, hey, maybe this is that missing piece?
Yeah, in 2015, I had a colleague who had 2 autistic sons. And it was actually through his recommendation around the testing that they'd done on their sons and how they had gone from basically non-verbal children to being in normal schools and doing very well. So they'd cleaned up the diet, but it was actually awareness of some of the genes that predisposed them to needing support. That opened my mind up completely. And this 2015, so timeline wise, 2008 was when the China incident had happened to me. And then the court case was resolved 2 years later. I got my job back, but again, I just pushed a lot of things aside. But 2015, it was really DNA coming into my training. So I jumped in and became Fit Genes trained, or a lot of other companies that I started learning. I was just like a sponge, but it was mostly for helping people that were stuck in that I was working with. It wasn't actually for myself straight away. But when I did start to notice, oh, okay, I've got maybe I didn't realize anyone in my family had any mental health stuff. But when I saw my genes and I became aware of the risks that I could maybe fall into if I didn't really know how to look after myself and just give these genes pathways, some support. So genes don't work in isolation. Usually there's a group of them that are more like a pathway that is all connected, and there'll be a few that are more influential. So it's a bit like a more stronger influencer. And those are the ones that I became really aware of needing to support, especially my blood sugar and the brain health. They were the really key ones for me. And so, yeah, it was really changing the way I prioritized what I was doing, rather than just feeling like it was some general one-size-fits-all approach. And I also knew when I felt like I was getting stuck, like as I got into my early 40s, that I started having hormonal changes. And so the genes allowed me to adapt to either life circumstances or age-related changes, and just look at them again as a map. A bit like if you had, or a blueprint to your house, and saying, well, this is the foundations that the house was built on. And when you can look at that and then say, okay, well, this is where the cracks were from the beginning, and we can just work on rebuilding those and making life a little easier. It's a little more streamlined.
We say that genetics load the gun and environment pulls the trigger. And in your case, your incident was certainly pulling that trigger and setting off this chain reaction. And that's where I guess the epigenetics comes into play, doesn't it? So your genes are one thing, and if you're never triggered and you always have a fabulous diet and you're doing all the right things just out of lifestyle, you may never experience what your we don't like to call them faulty genes, but the ones that have got those snips in them could possibly bring into your life. But when that trigger is pulled, it's quite a dramatic bodily response.
Yeah, it's like the earlier you can detect it, the easier it is to reverse it. You can either be spiraling down or rebuilding and getting stronger by spiraling up. So the earlier you can be aware that there's a trigger that hasn't really been resolved or addressed, it's just much easier. So it's like we get this accumulation of triggers that go unresolved, and you dive deeper and deeper and deeper. And that's really where you see not just subclinical diagnosis, but you'll see, chronic diseases being either not just early stage or advanced. This is where you get that progression of what someone's going through and how far along it's been progressing. Whether it be diabetes or whatever the condition someone has. So, yeah, it's been super useful for me to be able to fast track patients that had been stuck for a really long time. And I was never the first person that they'd call. I was someone that they'd, go around looking for answers for sometimes years. And when they luckily hadn't given up and become aware of how powerful gene testing was, even if they were doing hormone or gut testing at the same time, that it was just that part, the test that would never be needed to be done again. The genes wouldn't change. So it was always going to be a useful reference if someone could interpret that test for them in a way that was prioritizing their symptoms with the blueprint of what they were built on.
It really is an incredible clinical tool, isn't it? If you think, an average GP appointment here in Australia is 15 minutes, half an hour. If you book a long one, you really don't have a lot of time to deep dive into too much. And normally you'd only see a GP if you're going in with a particular problem. We know, working with our clinical nutritionist here at the Aging Project, Lindsay Kosh, is, her consultations are an hour long, if not more. There's this incredible opportunity to really seek out somebody's health journey. And you're saying that genetic testing really just cuts to the chase. It sort of fast tracks how deeply and how quickly you can resolve or help to resolve somebody's issues.
Yes. And even knowing the symptom picture, sometimes I could actually listen to where the family history was and the current symptoms, and the patient will often prioritize where they're wanting the quickest relief because it's the biggest pain point. And that would also highlight to me, was it inflammation? Was it potentially mental health related? Where were they needing the most support? And I'd start to already think, I think these genes are going to be playing into it. And what can I do to support those genes, even without a test initially? So that's where I really would build trust with the person. And then I'd say to them, just try this. It's not going to be too harmful because you're testing something that's very low, safe, often food related too. So this is really where the epigenetics of they're swimming in this environment of toxicity related to how well the body is able to detoxify. So is it a lack of detoxifying vegetables alongside, building blocks of protein that need to be relating to not only the brain health, but also the blood sugar. So it's like I was able to map things, and anyone can learn this. It's really just the old clinicians I've heard of, like very in ancient times, they actually didn't have the lab testing that we have today. So it was actually through questioning that they had to ask good questions and be able to listen to the patient's individual story. And it's an art form really that hopefully will never be lost, but you do need time. Like you said, you can't do it in 10 minutes. And it's really where those hour-long appointments, and often I would say to people that you know your body better than anyone else. So it's often not even being able to hear what you're thinking about what's going on, because we're stuck in whatever's in our head, that as soon as a person starts talking about those things, they're like, actually, I know a lot of this stuff already. I'm just not able to put it into practice. And especially for men having their DNA testing, it was I saw a lot of people with addiction problems, and it was really validating for them to say, oh wow, it's not my lack of willpower, it's not that I'm like someone that is just not trying hard enough. They've got this like related to, there's a couple of genes like MAOA. It relates to mood, and DRD2, which is the dopamine gene. And when those come together and someone's, in a bad mental mood, then the addiction genes can be like the group together. And without the awareness, it was like the first stop to being able to say, oh, I'm on default right now. And I know that this is where I actually can make a change, and a small change, to put things into practice and like then stop that from just automatically happening where they spiral down their old habits.
It's incredibly fascinating, isn't it? Because as you say, there's a lot of honesty and self-reflection that has to come from this kind of healing. And often, we won't admit or even really know that one small trigger or something that seems small now might have really had a huge effect on us when we were younger. And you don't know how your body's going to respond to that type of trauma or incident. But you might, when you're older now, go, well, I am anxious, or I am, wired and tired, and I don't know what it is. And it's sort of quite difficult to say, oh, well, there was something that happened when I was 6, if it doesn't really seem like a big deal now, but your body's still trying to recover from that and trying to get over it. And I think the honesty that comes from your genes being set from day one, there's nothing you can do to actually change them. We can trigger them, but we can't change them. There must be a lot of relief that you see, as you say, in patients that say, oh, thank goodness, I thought it was all me.
Yeah, there's two sides of people that I've seen. There's the ones that are really willing to face what they've been through and be aware of how they can change and influence it. And then there's others that are almost scared of what it will tell them, as if that was a death sentence. And that's definitely not what the DNA testing does. The type of testing that the lifestyle genomics, it's the functional quality of life genes. It's not the medical genetics that is going to say, well, you've got a high risk of your baby being born with, chromosomal defects. That's not this type of testing. So there are misconceptions around what the DNA testing will give someone. And so I like to focus on the ones that are more empowering, and they're related to mood, blood sugar, inflammation, and they're hormonal driven responses that when you can actually just know that there's groups, there's no one size thing, there's no one intervention that's going to fix or support a gene. So that's why there's many things that someone can do through food and lifestyle, and that can actually just enhance the quality of their life so that they're aging more gracefully. It won't stop the aging process, but it's going to give them, like keeping our brain healthy is something that as we age, it's so important, because for a lot of us, it's related to our work, our relationships, and how we can still, stay like helpful to society and feel like that's a drive to the purpose of living, really. And without having, good brain health as one of those major tools, no matter how we look on the outside, it's just not going to be something that's fulfilling our soul. And that's really why I love this type of empowering type of work, rather than saying, here's something, just take a pill for it. And that's useful in the short term, but it's not the education-based and really putting patients into the driving seat for a lot of the things that they can do, rather than focusing on what they can't. It's like flipping it to a positive outlook instead.
Over at You Must Try It, we've discovered so many fabulous low-tox skin and makeup options. Many of our guests have spoken about reducing our overall toxic load, so that has become a huge priority for me. I've slowly moved to low-tox products, and You Must Try It have made it really easy. We only stock low-tox products we've tried, tested, and love at youmusttryit.com. So we have done the research for you. If you haven't visited us already, please stop by at youmusttryit.com for 10% off your first order. Well, let's have a look at that brain health, because, again, not a one-size-fits-all, but you have practices that obviously keep you in great well-being, feeling youthful, contributing. Obviously, Falun Gong is one of those. I've heard you talk about meditation and how that also helped you at a critical point. Is this a good brain health activity for everyone?
Yeah, well, before I started practicing Falun Gong, I had been doing a Buddhist meditation and yoga, and they were useful to some degree, except that I couldn't combine the mind, the books, and my mind was thirsty for, how do I stay calm when my body's calm but my mind won't rest? So I was really looking for something that combined both mind and body, because I'd been doing them separately. And that's what was so special about Falun Gong. And it was also that it actually helped me resolve conflict much more smoothly. So putting into practice truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance was the core part of where this stood out. And also it was free, so I'd never paid for a class. And So that was a really key part, because I'd had conflict with, my mom or my brother, and just, it was like something, again, I just would push away and ignore it and think it had gone away because it wasn't in my sphere at that time. But it was not actually facing it with an open heart. And so actually being able to open my heart was where I felt deeper into meditation as well. And as a result, I've managed to stay, quite healthy. I'm 50 next year, and I have managed to be, I even get through perimenopause without any, hormonal changes, like any hormone, not changes, they've definitely changed, but without any like interventions. So other than lifestyle and food and meditation. So that's still part of my daily practice. And because I've really got an active mind, I found the one to music was the best, which is Falun Gong, because to sit in silence was just like not
for
good
you.
for me.
Very difficult. And a lot of people, that monkey mind we talk about, isn't it, about calming that? But if you feel like your body needs to move as well, to find that combination of both obviously worked very well for you. Let's talk about the gut brain axis and how important that is. And as you say, by something that you eat or don't eat can have an amazing effect on your brain health.
Yeah, so it's huge. They always used to talk about gut instinct, in the old days. And so I've always had a sensitive gut, but I wasn't able to listen to it all the time. When I was writing my book and researching, I found out that we actually have 9 neurons coming from the gut to the brain. So for every one that comes from the brain, we've got 9 going up. So that's how influential the feedback is from our gut. And so, especially for highly sensitive people, then it's sometimes even more heightened. And really it starts with, there's, again, no one thing, but the quality of the food that we put into our body, it's not neutral. And it's really having either a positive effect or it's something that's burdening the body and making it work extra hard. And so to make the pressure a little easier in our modern life, the quality of putting less burden on the body is a good place to start. And so going back to, grandma's knowledge of, vegetables and proteins and healthy fats, it's a principle that we get told often in the media, but it's not something that people always know how to put into practice on a daily basis, because we live in a very tempting world. We've got all these hyper palatable foods, we've got the convenience available, and the food manufacturers know that they're very addictive substances for our brain. And so we're not having a neutral effect in the brain, which is also where I've seen as a mum that it's very hard to control or calm someone's behaviour when they're given really excitable foods or drinks that just they can't. It's normal. It's very natural that they're going to find it hard to manage those either wild teenage emotions or just that sugar rush. And then we've got computer games at the same time. So it's sort of like this total combination of out of control brain and behavior. And that's really where I was trying to unpack in the book. We've got this combination of gut, brain, and addictive behavior patterns. And to separate them means we're not going to have a full impact on the well-being of the person. So they really go together.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Because I'm now picturing a bowl of rocket and a beautiful almond croissant, and I can feel my eyes dilating even at the thought of something sweet and sugary and fabulous. And that is a stimulating reaction. I know the bowl of rocket is a much better choice for me. But as you say, that combination of the two, and you want to trust your gut and go with the rocket. Oh, but don't your eyes and you're thinking your brain really just wants to dive into something sweet.
Yeah. And we don't always just eat for physical reasons too, like emotional and psychological and social impacts are reasons why we choose the foods that we do. And that's why they often say that you're like the people that you hang out the most with, because if you're hanging out with a lot of people that just eat processed, take out foods all the time. It's really natural. You just want to fit in. But if you feel like you're sensitive and you're not honoring that in your own health, then at some point you can become a lighthouse for other people to be able to say, it's not that hard just to be you. You don't have to be molding to someone else to be able to be a kind and caring person to be around. And it's not coming from a judgment place. It's more about saying, I'm a better person when I take care of myself in a way that means that, yeah, I still enjoy sweet food sometimes, but it's nowhere near, and it's usually from fruits or from making my own treats and things like that. I like to be creative with food, and I like to use herbs and spices as well, and just create things. And that's where, again, we would have learned a lot of these things from being in the kitchen with our relatives. But when we go to the supermarket and we're just able to buy these things in a packet, we've shortcut that whole process of creating something as a community or as a group and learning from each other. And it's really where, I think people are starting to wake up to the food manufacturing as being something that's not driven towards our health as number one priority. It's often about profit and really just quick and easy things to fill our stomach, but it does have a cost added to it, and it's long-term health.
That's it. I think if we're all really honest, and again, it comes down to that trust, doesn't it? We know what's good for us and we know what's not in every aspect. You've developed the C.A.R.E. framework, or the C.A.R.E. framework, based on your experience. Can you walk us through what it stands for and how it works?
Yeah, so people used to ask me in clinic, what's the steps I need to take? And I'd be like, well, it's actually not steps, because sometimes you have to be the one in the driving seat to say, I want to take this step first. So that's why I created a framework of care, because I wanted it to come from a place of positive change and caring change. So the C is for control what you can. A is for add in what you need most right now. So adding in foods that you're often missing. The R is for relationships, first with yourself and then with others, so that you can give from something that's a full cup. And then E is experiment. So that a lot of the things and the suggestions that I recommend are very safe to experiment with. And it was always saying that you can at any time just reassess, am I in control of this decision? Like, for example, if you go traveling, you haven't got a lot of control over what is available around you. But maybe you can bring things in your travel bag, or you can plan ahead to stop at certain places and before or after, and or just trying to fast for a little while. So it's trying to control what you can. And even if you can only control your breath, so we could come back to some really simple things, maybe putting some good headphones on and listening to music, stopping yourself from being bored. There's a lot of things that when I make suggestions and trigger people to think about what they like to do, that actually they realize, oh, I didn't think I had control over those things, but they just weren't prompted to think about them for themselves.
I love this. And the fact that you could have a care framework for at home and your daily routine and how you go about things, but then a care framework with how you are in your office or in your workplace. They could be very different, but if you're always sort of functioning from that place of care and working through those steps, it's going to keep you on track, isn't it? It's going to keep you sort of always, you've fallen off the wagon a little bit there if you're traveling. But if I have, my playlist with me that I know that keeps me calm, or if I have my meditation practice, I know that I can bring myself back and get back on track and back on the right road.
Yeah, you've got it. That's exactly
Oh, I
right.
love it.
Because yeah, it's again putting you in the driver's seat. Because what I really wanted to say is I'm just here to interpret your signals, and I'm here to notice things that maybe you're not even. You're busy. You're thinking further ahead. You've got work, the family life. There's so many things to juggle. So a coach or having a health professional just be able to point the things out that you need at the time that are most important right now. But a framework, I feel like, is something that is putting kindness back into your daily actions so
Yes.
that it's really coming from a place of, oh, like you said, I messed up. Maybe I'll just not beat myself up and use that as a habit to motivate myself. Maybe I'll just put some cooked vegetables in my next meal, and then I'll call a friend and look for some positive social reinforcement so that I don't feel isolated. And I'll listen to some uplifting music, or I'll, just look in nature. And I love watching animals because the way they interact with each other, if they go through a stress response, they'll like freeze up, but then they move, they shake it out.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that so fascinating. And other trauma experts, I don't call myself a trauma expert, but the ones that really are at the top of their game, they talk about this with animals too. That freeze response, which is what I went through in China, is something that your body needs to move afterwards. Otherwise, you can go into shutdown. And one of the little tips that I often give patients now is that, if you're sitting at your desk and you get some bad news through an email and you're still sitting there hours later and you haven't moved, that knowing that you'll have to get up at some point and move that hormone response, that cortisol through your body, just so your physiology understands that you are now safe again. Because the body's always wanting to get that alarm system in our nervous system is saying, am I safe? Is this person safe? And so being able to be anchored in what you do is really where that intuition and guidance, you can trust it again, because you're the one that's actually knowing how to like reset and tune it in
This is so
through little
fantastic.
tips.
So
Yeah, so
fantastic,
easy.
Sheridan. And the fact you can have all these little frameworks making up your big framework. So you can have little care packages
Yeah.
for every
Yes.
aspect of your life. And even having one, as you say, when you're in a stressful work situation and whatever it might be is coming, you're already worked up. And as you say, that email then arrives in your inbox. If you have a little framework ready for how I deal with this situation, it's just going to keep you that much more, not on guard, but ready, I suppose, and not in a fight or flight, but just prepared.
Yeah.
And I'm going to draw on my little care framework here when I'm running late for school pickup, and my little care framework over here, and ultimately have your big overall care framework that is how you live your life and how you go about every situation. But I think, it's such a lovely tool to have in our toolbox.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that.
Oh, you're welcome. I mean, breath work is part of the in chapter 6, I talk about the lifestyle interventions and things like that. And meditation is something that not everyone could start with straight away. I get that. It seems a bit of a jump if someone's not even never tried it. But breath work is something we're born with from the minute, that's just tuning into your breath is a really good place to start. And then movement-based meditation is what Qigong is. Mm-hmm. So that's where there's so many things that people can just experiment with that are really bringing that awareness of mind and body together, and being able to safely experiment with things that are traditional practices. And they've never gone away, but they're actually being in the limelight now because people are starting to see that they haven't gone away, because these are really why they worked. And breath is always a good place to start. In fact, with speaking too, try and tell myself that that should be my first word is coming out through my breath. And that when I'm rushed or something like that, I know it's really hard for people to hear the message that I'm saying, because my breath is not in control at all. So it's just a work in progress. And I'm just here as a guide and walking the journey as well. So
I know you talk about heart-centered living. So how can someone begin to make choices that are aligned with their true self or that heart-centered living?
yeah, so having values, knowing what your values are, is a really good place to start. And that's being able to then prioritize the way you live through how you look after yourself, and then being able to use how you, like, if you're not healthy, it's really hard to extend that to other people, even if you've got a good heart and you really, really want to help people. So being aware of what your own values are is a good place to start. And care and kindness is really a good place for, there's not too many people that are frightened of caring people, unless, but it's really, so keeping that, there's a lot of frameworks around about what people's values are and whether someone's spiritual or religious or whatever they are aligned with. But having purpose to help others is a really just a good place for the foundation of why you want to be healthy. Because without questioning why you want this, it's not really giving you, it might give you short-term results, but being able to sustain it and feel like you're enjoying it too, because it shouldn't be something where you sacrifice, but it's all about punishment. So it's really keeping it in perspective to say, I have a reason for being here and I'm just going to do my best. And then this is the way that is going to give someone else the strength to be able to do their best. And so it's like passing it on in a positive framework. And I mean, there's like starting with what you eat every day. That's why ADD is the A in care. Because a lot of people are missing the building blocks that they need for their cells to be fueled well. And when your cells are screaming but your stomach is full, it's because the nutrients that your cells need are missing. So you might have calories in your body, but your body doesn't just want empty calories. And so that's going to keep someone fatigued. And again, if they've got good values but they've got no energy, that would be where I start. And so it's really saying, okay, if you haven't got any, I used to tell patients all the time, if you've got no gas or petrol in your car and you want to stand behind it and push it up a hill versus go and get some gas or petrol and put it in, it's going to be a much easier day to fill your tank. And that really starts with the quality of what you eat and drink, and then think as well. So putting certain things like negative news or really like what we listen to and what we absorb through our ears and our eyes, it still has an effect as well.
So don't think about yourself, think about your cells.
Oh,
What
that's
do
a
my
good one.
cells need today?
Yeah.
Not what I want, but what do my cells need? My cells.
Yes, that's very good. That's really good.
You can use that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
We talk to a lot of women that are sort of over 40, and we think we've got life either pretty sorted by now or we've completely lost the plot. But what's one way that we could all start using our DNA and our nervous system insights to take control of our health?
So one of the genes that people often like to hear about is FTO, because as we get older, as we get over 40, it's really easy to put on weight. I know this too. And I've got the FTO gene as a SNP, which means it needs some support. So if I was to live on default and eat a standard Australian or a standard American diet, then it's very easy for me to become obese, because it's just, and what this gene does is makes you more hungry. It makes you feel like even after you finished eating that, there's some reason that you should be eating something else. So for women over 40, knowing about this particular gene and the group of genes that it goes with, so there are other ones related to that, often with blood sugar and insulin, and that there's some hormone ones as well, that those can be supported through a healthy diet, movement, and just awareness of saying, oh, okay, I have to set my environment up for success because my willpower is not going to get me very far. And age is not going to be working in my favor if I don't have a supportive environment. So, for example, like I have a teenage boy, so he eats different foods to what I do. But I'm really aware that I still buy things that I really enjoy eating, and they're not just all vegetables and protein. I'll make some things. I love blueberries. I like making things with coconut, and then if I'm out, I know how to read ingredients lists. Mm-hmm. So I'm just really aware of how I support myself is different to what he would need. Because I'm not the same as a teenage boy. So it's just owning that. And so identity is really part of having good health. And so, yeah, genes don't have to be your destiny as far as like, oh, my family had this, I must be waiting to get it. That's not at all what this means. And so, yeah, knowing about your blood sugar and your obesity risk, because obesity is also really going to, or even just being heavily overweight, it's not, it's going to affect your joints. It's going to affect your quality of mobility at some point, being able to be independent in your living, because, you know, it's only just going to get harder and harder. So the earlier, and being able to change that at any point is really where you say, okay, it's not too late. Okay, I can restart next meal, next day, and then you're all fine again, to be able to say, get one foot in front of the other, and look for supportive groups as well online. So
that's a great idea. Well, we hope that we are here for all of you here at the Aging Project. And I know, Sheridan, this conversation that we've had today has been so beautiful. I can't thank you enough. And I know that there's some wonderful takeaways for everyone in there, whether it's acknowledging the trauma that they may have gone through and how that is affecting the way they live daily now, whether it's setting up a care framework for yourselves in your home or in your workplace, whether it's coming from that heart-centered living and really aligning your values with your health choices and your identity. I think you've given us so much to think about. Sheridan's book is DA-Powered Health. It's something that I all think you should have a read of. It's fabulous that you can jump in and out of chapters when you think you need it, or read it front to back. There's some wonderful, wonderful help and gold in there for everyone. Sheridan, enjoy New York. I do wish I was there with you right now. It seems like a beautiful place to visit. Might be just what my little healing needs is a trip away. We wish you all the best. And look, thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much for having me, Shelley. And in your interpretation, I'm so happy that you were able to, it makes sense of what I was, putting together. And so I really appreciate it. Thank you.
As always, the Aging Project podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes. Always seek medical advice from a qualified practitioner.